The sequences of complete darkness that occur during Alex and Gordon's escape from the crashed train to the surface streets was something completely different from Half-Life 2 and totally unexpected. It creates a very real sense of claustrophobia for the player. And as mentioned in your commentary, the complete darkness does indeed force the player to continually reassess and make more efficient the meager resources of light that are available, such as Gordon's wavering flashlight, which Alex does not seem particularly fond of having shown in her face. Flares, which we saw in Half-Life 2, are being used by the Combine, but now we can use ourselves, thankfully, not only to provide light, but also to set zombies on fire. And, of course, flaming zombies, which are much better than non-flaming zombies for emitting light. No, I'm no endocrinologist, and I can't possibly guess at the mysteries of zombie metabolism that must be occurring to make them so highly combustible, but, thank God for small favours. The climactic, frantic zombie battle that occurs while waiting for the lift to arrive is certainly a lesson in anxiety and panic. I can't claim that it didn't make my heart race and my palms sweat. The best approach seems to be to back yourself against a wall. That way at least the zombies only continually come at you from only about 180 degrees, more or less. You have a lot on your plate, as it were, continually checking to see if the lift has arrived, making sure Alex is not overwhelmed, trying to destroy the zombies themselves, or light them on fire to provide light, lighting new flares as the old ones burn out, and trying not to lose your sense of direction and become disoriented and run off in the wrong direction. It all reaches a crescendo as the lift finally appears and a handful of shrieking, fast zombies slam into you. And then the best bit of all is the final ride to the surface. It's like ascending through the different levels of Dante's Inferno. Every level has some brand new horde to witness, like catching brief glimpses of Hieronymus Bosch paintings. The antlion dragging the body away. The zombie banging on the gates. It's very priceless. City 17 reminds me very much of a much more destroyed version of many parts of Prague in the Czech Republic. Of course, I guess that's not at all surprising, I suppose, since it seems that this is exactly the look that was trying to be achieved, that of an Eastern European city in a possibly former Soviet satellite state. The parts of the city that we traverse in Episode 1, however, seem to be in a somewhat more residential area than in Half-Life 2. With more housing, fewer public buildings, save the hospital here of course, and almost no examples of the sort of Victorian-era, turn-of-the-century style architecture like we saw in much of City 17 and Half-Life 2. To me this change creates a definitely different sort of mood. It somehow seems a bit drier and much more desperate, which may of course not be entirely due to the architecture but also to the story at this point, as we are trying to escape the city as quickly as possible. As in Half-Life 2, I'm very much intrigued by the remnants of what remain of the pre-Combine invasion city and world in general. In this case, the telephones, whose wires have simply been cut and the loose receivers have been left to hang on the phone, perhaps deliberately, almost in a mockery of the world it once was. The graffiti found throughout Half-Life 2, not only in City 17 but everywhere really, and now in Episode 1, which itself has some new additions, has always been a point of fascination for me. It looks completely legitimate, as if you actually hired some professional taggers to create it. Some graffiti uses the Roman alphabet, while other uses some Cyrillic characters, which indicates to me that some of it was from before the Combine and some of it after. There are also the myriad posters, some very old, some very new, some pre-Combine, and some actually Combine propaganda. Much of the graffiti gives subtle hints as to what has occurred during the last 10 years of the Half-Life story, and some of it is obviously has meanings only, I suppose, to the Valve artists who created it. However, all of it, I think more than anything else in the game, gives a very clear sense of the society and the history of the former world that's now lost. I was delighted to rise out of the zombie-infested train station and see Dr. Kleiner on the public address system. As I stated previously, I do find the story of the game much more gripping than the actual gameplay, and to be able to have a rest while hearing Dr. Kleiner summarize what's been going on since the end of Half-Life 2 is really a wonderful part of the game. Hearing him describe in dry scientific detail that people will now become pregnant from sex is of course amusing, and also his unending devotion to his head crab Lamar is always is always touching. To find that antlions and antlion guards have found their way into the city is a very good suggestion as to just how pear-shaped things have really become in City 17. I personally did not think it was possible for antlions to become even more annoying than they were in Half-Life 2, but boy was I wrong. Having to plug up the burrows is a great addition to the game, and thankfully at least it does indeed stop them for a bit, unlike the never-ending spawn of these creatures that came up out of the sand in the Highway 17 and Sandtrap chapters of Half-Life 2. What I find highly amusing is that if you try to plug up a burrow just before destroying the antlion guard, it will come over and try to unplug it, and usually succeed. I suppose now we truly know why they're called antlion guards. I really wish we could learn more about the life cycle of the antlion species, and especially the relationship between the antlions and the larger guards, but I guess this is more of a game, really, than a nature documentary. Pity I'll have to resort to using my imagination. Again. The safe house is really one of my favourite parts of the entire game. It comes at the end of a rather lengthy fight against Combine soldiers and antlions, and it again gives us a chance to sort of rest and gather information. I always enjoy talking, to the citizens, and of course peculiar or even paranoid observations are almost nearly always worth at least a smile. The first time I played and entered the safe house, I really was hoping to have a bit more interaction with the characters inside than was actually the case. However, I realized that this would, add a lot of hesitation and complexity to the game when probably not really necessary. And the majority of players, I think, want action, perhaps, as opposed to non-combat interaction. The whinging couple that you hear and see through the floorboards is really one of the most delightful little discoveries of the game. It's really quite a clever and unique addition. In fact, it nearly feels like an intrusion into the game, given its peculiarity, albeit a good intrusion. I think what makes it so entertaining, of course, is that while the destruction of the Combine portal has really only been a few hours beforehand, this couple is already moaning about the desperate state of affairs that have come as a result. One of their best lines is the man says that they're all starving and Dr. Kleiner's crab is probably eating grade A head. He's like, they're already suspicious of the new supposed leaders. I think their almost instantaneous doubt, paranoia, and cynicism following the collapse of the portal is really sort of a satire on our own political times. I was definitely amused by both Alex's and the couple's reference to Colonel Cubbage, who was certainly a singularly peculiar character to encounter in Half-Life 2, and why, I might ask at this point, was the only English person in the game made out to be such a twit. At the point he was mentioned, I was really hoping that Cubbage would burst through the door like the Kool-Aid Man with a Lee Enfield rifle in his hands and shout out something like, "Alex Vance? Dr. Freeman? Hurry! The Combine are about to launch a massive assault against the safe house. Take these resistance members outside to the street and form a British infantry square to beat off their attack. I'll stay inside here and cover the exits." But then I realised I'm probably the only Episode 1 player who would have thought that a British infantry square was funny.